welcome back to the Tango Banter. Today's episode is pretty special because I finally got to sit down with Lee Litas and interview her about her journey of moving to Buenos Aires. Lee is a journalist and a tango dancer, and she made the big move during COVID, no less. So her story isn't just about the dance, but what really happens when you stop being a tourist and really build your life around tango in Buenos Aires. We talk about the milonga culture in Buenos Aires, as well as the codes and what really shifted for her when she stayed there long enough, and what it really takes to become and live as an artist in Buenos Aires. Now, quick heads up, we did have some audio issues towards the end of the episode, so I apologize for the subpar quality of the audio due to connection issues, but hopefully you will still get a lot out of this conversation. Now, if you are in the US, you can actually catch Lee performing in Wheeling, Illinois on July 18th. And she has some performances coming up in Europe later this summer. So check out her Instagram, which I have included in the show notes to see where she'll be next. All right, let's get into it. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's really nice to finally do this with you. We've been collaborating on this for some time, so I'm excited to have this conversation. The first thing that I wanted to go through is talk about that first spark of the idea that you had at some point to move to Buenos Aires, and then what did it actually take to make that idea a reality?
Well, I had been coming here. I had been here 14 times. I know I have friends in Chicago. That's where I grew up, who had come here 19, 20, and many more times. But after 14 times of being here, just every time that I got on a plane, it was harder and harder to leave. And I'd be constantly bawling, thinking, where am I going? This is home. And I'm a big believer in living in your reality, standing in your reality. And I said, I'm going to be there. I'm going to move there. And it became an unequivocal fact in my life. So I came here during the pandemic. I specifically wanted to come here to see what Buenos Aires was like without tango, because everything was shut down. And I found that it had so much tango. There were so many clandestinos. It was like real life footloose, with people hiding, not to do drugs or something nefarious, but hiding to dance, hiding to get together, to have those connections. And I completely fell in love with it. And so I went back, this was in 21, just began making steps towards moving. I had two friends that had made that kind of change already. One had moved to Bali. Another one had moved here. And so they were my big gurus in terms of how to do this. I remember talking to my friend who had moved to Bali, and she had taken, I think, 2 years to do this. And I said, Jen, I'm lost. I have no idea what to do. And she said, get boxes. Okay, so I'd get boxes and I'd fill the boxes and I'd get rid of the boxes and then I'd get more boxes. And I talked to her in a month and I said, I did it. I actually got rid of all the stuff.
You were pretty clear on wanting to move there for some time. And from the moment that you actually decided to do it to when you actually moved, how long did it take you to find yourself in Buenos Aires?
It took me 4 months.
Wow. Yeah,
I don't know.
Oh my God. It sounds
fast.
like you really were in that phase of just like full blown 100%.
That's
giving
it. I'm
all.
done. Yeah, I'm done. Not just, there are people who are serious about moving now, who are talking about the political environment, but it was no less contentious when I was moving almost 4 years ago. For me, I wanted to be in a place where art was was a real tangible thing, which I felt that Buenos Aires is, having so many friends who are professional dancers who make their living as professional dancers, and it's not a whim and it's not a fancy. It's a legitimate um, decision for life. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be in that place, and it's actually the reason why I'm doing my professorship now, an arts PhD with an emphasis on folk and tango. The education is making it very interesting to see, giving me a much fuller idea of art in all of its framework, and that's kind of the place where I wanted to be.
And now you've been there for 4 years. And so, as someone who's now more of an insider than you are an outsider, I think at 4 years, I think you've now observed a lot more nuance. Do you see that there's misconceptions or things that people get wrong about life in Buenos Aires when they're just visitors, like tango tourists who come and they're just there for a few months? Like, are there things that you know now, having lived there for this long?
When I first got here, and for a long time, I was going out all the time, and
Mhm.
even my friends here were like, "Lee, you are not a tourist anymore. You don't have to go to every single milonga because we come as foreigners where tango is not as ubiquitous as it is here with many milongas during a given day or a given week,
Mhm.
and we come with such hunger. We want to try and be everywhere, and it's impossible. There's a reason why a lot of foreigners, when they come here and they come for 10 days, they leave with a terrible cold or a flu. It's because they haven't slept, and the body just ends up giving up. Well, multiply that by a couple of years, and what are you doing with your life? Um, Other questions begin to arise. You have to get a place. You have to have health insurance. You have to have, basic things. So coming here and living just for tango is not really not really productive. It doesn't work that way. What you want to do with your life as a tango dancer and as a person, and reframing what tango means to you.
So for you, it sounds like it's not that kind of addictive thing that I know that I felt when I first went to Buenos Aires, that like, oh, I'm exhausted. I haven't slept for days, but I still need to go because there's still more I need. So it sounds like you're kind of past that phase at this point, living in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, you. Well, I mean, I completely get it because you want to fill up with as much as you can before you leave because you're not going to have that tango where you go. Whereas for me, it's now the opposite.
Mm.
Now, when I leave and I travel to other countries, I always feel like it's quote unquote tango light because the schedule is so much lighter. You don't have the option of going to that many milongas. There just aren't that many milongas, and maybe not the dancer that you want to be dancing with. But yeah, now that I'm here, I pick and choose, and as I watched my friends here, and I didn't understand when they were turning up their noses at particular milongas. I was thinking before, as a visitor, I thought, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's still a milonga. It's still dance, and now they're much more discerning. I feel that here now. When I go to milonga, um, I want I'm looking for something in particular. It's not just that I'm going to go to every single milonga one after the other.
Yeah, I've heard this from multiple dancers actually who spend a lot of time in Buenos Aires, that they tend to not go out that much. And for some of them, they even focus more on like intimate gatherings with friends for like practica settings rather than going to the Milonga. And this actually reminds me of a question that one of the listeners submitted, which would be nice to sneak in here because I've heard rumors that floorcraft in Buenos Aires has gotten worse over the years, that it's progressively has gotten worse as a standard to the point where some dancers choose not to go out to milongas and go to more intimate settings because of that. Have you observed this as someone who's been there for the last few years, or has it been pretty steady?
I was dancing recently with Miguel Angel Soto in a milonga, and he just kept complaining about floorcraft. I'm not sure that it's from locals. I have to say, I have a feeling that a lot of it. I mean, there during tourist season, what we call high season here. Um, there's a lot of locals that turn up, that kind of roll their eyes, and I understand. I think part of it, not just not having access to maybe that many lessons or the kind of teachers that might teach you about these things, but also there's going to be fewer people um, where people are dancing, so they're used to space. And in Buenos Aires, there's very little space. There's a reason why there was a milonguero style, in the 40s, and everything was linear because they had very little space and they had to do all of their onchas and they had to do all of their movements linearly. Well,
Hmm.
that has carried on, and the milongueros who do know how to dance in a crowded floor, they can do all sorts of things. I think that's the complaint. That on the whole, there's degradation in floor craft, but I think that when people come from areas where they have much more space, not to talk about different styles, there has been a bigger return to salon versus
That's what I've been hearing too. The aesthetic is
versus
very salon right
It is
now.
salon. I think that and it's in the way that I like to dance as well, that it's maybe 70% salon and 30% where you have this, as they say, chiclosidad, this ability to open up and come back.
Hmm.
And I appreciate being able to do that. I grew up, quote unquote, in my tango style. I started when it was neo tango. So I started with bigger movements and had to bring it down where some of the other people who have never done it cannot open up as much, don't have the comfort level with opening up as much. But people who are coming from a place where they're doing primarily neo tango and large movements where they have a lot of space, they're going to find it difficult moving
Mm.
around a crowded dance floor. And if you go to a Sunday afternoon milonga here, you're going to have a hard time, and maybe even have your feathers ruffled that you can't do all the movements that you want to do. But there's a lot of people dancing here, so
Now, to piggyback on that, I'm curious actually if there are other forms of etiquette that are obvious to the local dancers, but the foreigners miss, like besides just the navigation, which I think you're on the money on this because I've heard many times from dancers who come from small communities and they go to Buenos Aires and they're like, there's no space. But are there other things like that that we as visitors to Buenos Aires might not necessarily be aware of? That's very much part of the etiquette there that the locals might be more serious about.
I think the codes are as we are taught. Hopefully, in any tango community anywhere in the world, um, you are taught codes. I know with some of my friends, I mean, you can come up if they're close friends, or if you're sitting at the table, you can ask someone, but for them, verbally. But for the most part, they stick to codes. They stick to cabeceo. They appreciate cabeceo on the dance floor between leaders, where one leader is entering the floor. I was recently at a milonga, and my partner and I tried to get in. He tried to cabeceo the other partner, the other leader who was dancing, part of the other couple. He did not acknowledge us. We tried to get in because we had stood for maybe half a song waiting for acknowledgement. Um, and the other leader literally pushed the partner that I was with. It was very intense, to the point where we had to stop and we got off the dance floor, and the two of them had words.
Now,
So
were
this is
these
not.
local dancers, foreigners?
These are
Who are we
local
dealing
dancers.
with here? Oh, wow.
They were both local dancers, and the one leader did not want to change his style around and allow us to get in. I mean, this is something where they would call this peleadores, and people who are fighters who were like in the 1940s, where that's typical, where they would fight, and if somebody tried to get in, they would make their elbow really big, so as not to let the other person in. And but it happens. It happens still. So to
Mm-hmm.
avoid this, definitely come a say the person who's dancing in front of you, so that they can acknowledge that you have your own space as well.
Wow. I mean, I've experienced this to a small degree. I've noticed that, like back in the day when I was just following that at some of the milongas in Buenos Aires, that the embrace became almost like a weapon, like between them, that they would sort of claim their territory with the embrace. Now, I've also heard of some rumors of dancers actually being carded or like being asked to leave for breaking certain codes. Does that actually happen, or is that just rumors?
I don't know about carded. I don't think I've ever heard that. I
Okay,
have
okay.
heard. I have. I have heard in like the more traditional milonga, like cachirulo, where uh, there's a certain standard that
Hmm.
Hector Cachirulo wants to maintain. And I mean, this is his milonga, his longest standing milonga probably in Buenos Aires today, and he has certain standards he that some people agree with and some people don't. And I have been present at a time where a guy came in shorts, uh, black socks, and tango shoes.
To
If you can
Cachirulo.
imagine this visual. And he asked him to leave, and I mean the the fashion policeman inside me is going, yes, okay, that that should not be that should not be allowed. But uh, it's controversial. But his is one of the
Hmm.
only milongas where he runs it with an iron fist, and still, um, no matter how much people complain, he he doesn't allow like that situation that had happened to me with people fighting on the dance floor, or dancing in a way that prevents other dancers from also enjoying their time at a milonga. Um, so
You mean
you
like
can't
he would
fault him.
step in? He would step in to somehow break that up as an organizer?
Yeah, he would, and he yells at people to dance well and to take classes. I mean, he's kind of bombastic. It's true, but it's still one of the best milongas to dance at.
I was the target of his serious gaze when I showed up wearing Toms, those Toms little shoes. And they were kind of beat up, but he sat me way in the back. I learned my lesson from then on. Like, you got to pay attention to what shoes you're wearing when you come in, not just what you're wearing on the dance floor.
For some people, those rules are too much, and I mean, luckily there are enough milongas here that cater to every taste. It doesn't have to be the mainstream ones like this. It
Hmm.
doesn't have to be the more conservative ones. There's milongas for every taste. There's gente amiga, who is more like what Sunderland used to be, which was a very famous milonga held in a gymnasium, very different from people who have never come here and thinking, well, why would I want to dance in a gymnasium when I can have this beautiful, whatever, studio? But this has always been a community, a social dance, a place where people come with their families, they come to have a nice dinner. And if they happen to like a song, they will get up and they will dance to that song. And then they will choose what other song they want to dance to. It's a very different approach to what we as foreigners have kind of grown up with in our tango lives, where we took lessons and then we went to standard, formed milongas, um, and coming with this hunger. without seeing the culture kind of behind it. I think we're,
Yeah.
as foreigners, taught that it has to be all perfect and beautiful, and tango is not. It's imperfect, and it's beautiful for being so imperfect.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing to is the more performative aspect of tango that we sort of think that's tango. When you dance tango, you dance that performative aspect of it. And I definitely recall a very clear night of dancing many, many years ago when I overheard somebody next to me talking about this exact thing, how milongas in the US are more about the dancing, and then in Buenos Aires it's about, the connection, the community. And I remember standing there and thinking, why? I talking to people? What? No. I just want to dance. Like, to me, it was just not in my awareness how that piece is such a huge, I mean, it's kind of like the main part of the iceberg, whereas the dance itself is like the tip of it. When I think about the main differences between tango in Buenos Aires and tango everywhere else, is the place that it holds in the consciousness of the people dancing it, that it's like, that it's not the movements, it's about what's underneath. The other question that I got from a listener has to do with the more practical side of living in Buenos Aires. And how do you make a living there for full time? Are you full time teaching, or do you have a remote gig, or what's the way that you make it work?
I say a little bit of both. I'm still a reporter, but yeah, I do give classes here as well. A little bit of everything. You can't, unless you're independently wealthy. It's it's
Right.
not that easy.
The hustle's real. Like I think this is a reality for any artist who decides to make it work for themselves full time. You have to realize the hustle's part of it. Now, I want to wrap up our conversation and ask, what do you think would be a way for people to enrich their understanding of tango not living in Buenos Aires? Like, if there's one thing that you think social dancers around the world could do more of that would allow them to grow and mature long term towards that kind of dance that you think is the thing that Argentine tango is, what would it be?
For me, again, as someone who did speak Spanish before I got here, and not understanding the lyrics was a huge thing. And so it helped so much to study Lunfardo. It just helped so much because Lunfardo is not just the dialect. That's the thing, like you were saying about the iceberg. You think you're dancing at this level, but there's all of this rich
Mm.
history, this rich meaning, and you can start with that, and of course, knowing the orchestra.
Thank you so much, Lee, for your
Thank
time.
you.
And it was so wonderful to learn more about what you're doing. And I'm excited to see what comes next and how it continues to evolve for you.
Thank you.